Um, okay, I would get things started. Give me a sec. Cool. We got quite a few people today. Right. Okay, let's get things started. So, welcome to weekly SIP call number 32. Today is the 10th of January, 10th of February. And today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin transfer request SIP. And today's guest speaker is Yannick. Is a full stack engineer from Hero. I believe he's sort of leading the charge along with a few other people to try and get this concept or development forward. So yeah, thank you, Yannick, for coming. So we'll talk a little bit about what this call is about in general and the status of all the SIPs, and we'll get into the main topic. And we can have a discussion, or Janet will present what he has at the moment and thoughts. And if anybody got any questions at the end, feel free to ask. So this weekly call, we try to keep it informative, collaborative, and educational. And you can come here and advocate for your SIP or share your SIP ideas or any improvement ideas. To be honest, so even if it's to do with non-technical stuff like governance stuff, also perfectly fine. And here you will get smart people's feedback, and will help you develop your idea forward. And I'm putting together different committees, and we can all help each other trying to get early ideas move on to the later stages. And SIP is just a document that you use the actual doc that you put together. That has a specification of the concept, whether it's governance related or technical stuff related. SIP 15 is actually stacks 2.1 plus SIP 20. But these big improvements all live in a doc. So just to give everybody where we are in terms of the general SIP landscape, we have several early SIPs in the pipeline, which are sort of at draft stage or almost at draft stage. So we are actively trying to help these SIPs move on to the next stage, so it can actually become a formal draft and be voted on, or at least vetted by the SIP editors committee. We also have lots of late stages SIPs, such as stacks 2.1, which is SIP 15 and SIP 20, and SIP 18 and 19. Those are basically ready as soon as stacks 2.1 goes live. So this is sort of where we are overall, and lots of important topics such as mining decentralization. We are trying to, or at least some people in the community are trying to come up with a dust mining SIP. I think Trust Machine maybe is thinking of submitting something there. So several things can help us move on the decentralization of stacks blockchain. And this is where we want to aim towards, the decentralization of governance, mining, stacking, maybe nodes as well. So lots of things you can contribute. Please feel free to join and submit your own SIP idea as well. If you see things around the crypto landscape and you think something something might work really well in stacks, please feel free to get these ideas in. So in terms of stacks 2.1, as far as I know, stacks 2.1 Raiden testnet is live. I don't know if any core devs can give us a little bit more detail how that's going. Maybe Aaron, if anybody, or Igor.
Yeah, sure. So from what we've seen, the Stacks 2.1 radon testnet is chugging along. Haven't seen anything concerning. But yeah, take a look at that tweet and that linked gist if you are interested in poking around at it, and please do poke around at it. The more people that poke at it, the more likely we are to figure out if something is wrong beyond what our testing is sort of already doing. So yeah, play around with it.
Thank you. So with all this RC 1, 2, 3, 4, it's already being poked around. Is that right? But this one is sort of the final one before we go live. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not final until it's live, because yeah, as sort of this chain of RC candidates indicates, if we do find a bug, then yeah, there would be an RC5. So,
Okay.
but we're not expecting to. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
And do you know roughly when the radon testnet might end and we might go live from there, like a certain period of time?
I think that the idea is that the radon testnet is supposed to run for another week or so, and then we can mark when the 2.1 activation begins. So that would be like one stacking cycle, I think, subsequent, and then POX2 would activate 2 stacking cycles after that. So roughly that timeline.
So 7 days plus 3 cycles?
I think 3 cycles for POX2 activation. I think 1 cycle for 2.1 activation.
Oh, right. I see.
But yeah, I would say don't quote me on that. My history of reading calendars is pretty poor. So
that's okay. That's okay. I think we can probably expect it to be at least maybe end of Feb or early March for the Stack Super one. But it's based on no bugs, basically, right?
yeah.
But yeah, yeah, sometimes in March, hopefully earliest for Stack Super one and POX2. Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for the update. And just to let everybody know, Fridge has been testing the stacking pool, and he has a blog, and I would encourage everybody to read it because we really would like to extend the testing from the community members and get people involved, you know, whether it's radon or stacking pool. So yeah, the more people test it, the better. And so yeah, just other things I see on GitHub, just want to bring it to light out of the GitHub into the sort of the eyes of the community. So BTT transfer request SIP, that was on GitHub. And today we'll be talking about that with Janik. And there's a new one from Kieran, web client API. I haven't read deeply into it, but I don't know if Mark knows much about it. From Hero, maybe you want to give us a very sort of brief introduction what this is about?
Yeah, sure. Basically, I'll go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually handle that part. I sort of covered in the slides as well if you want.
Oh, okay. It's kind of related, right?
Yeah. So that's where we're trying to converge and make this as simple as possible for any upcoming feature that might be funny. Sorry for cutting in there, Mark.
So maybe I'll just leave this one till your talk. Okay, cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so community member like Werner very kindly drafted a marketplace trade SIP. Yeah, and he has sort of separated the generalized SIP into another SIP. So it's if anybody wanna chime in or help out, here's your opportunity to contribute. And it's amazing to see not just from Hero or Trust Machine, but community members start chiming in on these SIP ideas, and we want more of it. So my job in the next few months is to encourage and to build the sort of the support system around community SIPs. So yeah, watch out for that. So thank you, Werner. And another SIP that's been in the pipeline for a while is a code of conduct. I'm going to have a call with Julia today to see where we are and how we can move this forward. If anybody want to chime in again on GitHub and Stacks Forum. And I'm going to leave an open floor just before we get into Gen X talk, in case anybody got any SIP related comments or issue they want to bring up. I do have one, but I'll open the floor to everybody. Okay, I will bring one point up, is an issue that is being on GitHub, which is the SBTC Token Ticker Coalition. So many other chains do have SBTC already, and Werner spotted that and wonder whether this could be a problem in the future. I have commented my own 2 cents on that GitHub thread. But if anybody got any comments on this, please, yeah, let me know. I mean, just open your mic and.
Oh, I'm realizing if you need to speak and you can't because you're muted, just raise your hand and can make you a co-host of the. Oh, but actually, Aaron, you're able to do it without trouble, right? Okay, just making sure.
Is it because people are not co-hosts?
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. But Mark and Aaron were able to do it. But yeah, if you guys were.
Okay.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm curious about the traction of these other tokens, if we can get a sense of, you know, the community behind them, the size of it, because this, you know, we just don't know how big these other, you know, products are. And I think also something that we, I don't think anyone has looked at is, you know, any sort of copyright on this brand. And so perhaps this is a thing that we should be flagging to Andre.
Yeah, I think Andrew is on this call. Maybe Andrew can chime in on this.
Yeah, you know, we're aware of this. None of these other tokens have any meaningful traction that I've seen or the team has seen. I think the Synapse protocol might be the most, might have the most current traction. But ultimately, you know, it's something that was discussed prior to the white paper release, and you know, it was basically determined that it wasn't an issue. But appreciate you flagging this, and I can bring it back up to the team again just to confirm.
Cool. Yeah, I will drop you the link in the chat or in DM later. Maybe it'll be good because I guess maybe not everybody is aware that it's being vetted and is okay. So yeah, it would be great to inform people on that. My personal view is, even if there weren't any tokens out there right now, and we are the only one, there's nothing to stop other people coming in later and launch their own SBTC token, and we wouldn't be able to like trademark it I think. So I don't think would make much difference, even, you know, whether there are SBTC on the market now or not. That was my own take.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like you know, since we've already started kind of spreading the word around SBTC as well, you know, I don't know if it would be worth it to try to change that now and add extra confusion, since we already have XBTC as well that's wrapped and, you know, has different security implications and things like that. So I think it would make the most sense to just kind of continue. There's lots of overlap in various chains of wrapped Bitcoin and they have WBTCs all over the place. I think as long as it aligns with kind of the messaging that's coming out of the Stacks community of what SBTC is, and we make a lot of noise around it, everybody buying SBTC will know what they're getting.
Yeah, agreed. And thank you, Crossfire. In case anybody didn't know, Crossfire has kindly agreed to help out on the SIP editors front. Yeah, thank you, Crossfire. Okay, that's that done, and let's get into the main topic. Bitcoin transfer request SIP. So I'll stop sharing screen, and Yannick, you can share or not share if you have anything. I'll let you take over.
Sounds good. Thank you. So yeah, before diving too deep into the Bitcoin SIP, I wanted to sort of step back and talk about the wallet APIs, just to give a good overview of where we currently are in the ecosystem. So the current state of wallets, as we know them, was there wasn't really ever an official SIP. There was some work, but that SIP never really got even sort of into a good draft status because the ecosystem just kept evolving, right? There was new features that would have changed the SIP, and rather than sort of make that SIP official and constantly change it, it kind of just slowly became stagnant. So Stacks Connect, which is sort of a part of Stacks.js, or maybe not, depending on how you want to see it, was sort of a reference implementation of how a wallet client, so basically the developer making a website and wanting to integrate it with Hero wallet, for example, as a sort of the first one, or in general, any Stacks wallet like Xverse. This was sort of the reference implementation, right? Then MicroStacks came along, great library, did a good job, but most of the functionality or logic is still a fork of Stacks.js, so it's very compatible still to how things have been done in the past. And there are just some legacy parts that go back to the Blockstack days where things were a bit more hosted for these wallet applications that might maybe not make sense today anymore. So that's sort of where the current state is today. So of course there have been improvements to Connect, but no like real rewrites, if you want to call them that. And the SIP, the sort of draft issue that has been opened by Kyron in issue 117 that you showed earlier, that addresses this a bit and sort of provides a very, very small, simple API on how wallets could interact with, how clients could interact with wallets, for example, browser extension wallets, in this very simple API. And I really like this idea. I think we can still refine it, of course, and I hope the community comes in and leaves their comments there. Feel free to look at that issue 117 in the SIPs repo. I can link it later as well. But this rewrite would be a great idea going forward, I believe. And there's similar work. For example, Xverse has been exploring with Wallet Connect. And if you look closely at this code snippet from their documentation, which is an implementation of the Wallet Connect protocol, which already exists in other ecosystems, this part is very similar to the methods or parameters as they would also be proposed by Kyron's draft issue right now. So I think there's a good overlap that we can explore. But why are we even talking about this now? Why is there talk of changing wallet APIs? If it works, right? So why do we want to change this? And a big part of this is just Stacks coming closer to as an L2 on top of Bitcoin, and also Bitcoin transfers as the SIP has sort of been introduced here, which is not really a SIP yet, because we would want to target the wallet APIs first before doing more complex things, I think, because it makes sense to think about our roots as they are built today before expanding on top of them. And of course, in the past few days, a lot of people have been experimenting with ordinals and discovering ordinals for themselves. And I know a lot of Stacks ecosystem folks are looking into Ordinals as well. So how can we solidify this connection between Stacks and Bitcoin? So I think that all makes sense in why we should talk about this today. Here's also a screenshot that Mark has shared on what might be coming soon as for Bitcoin transfers in the Hero wallet, and Xverse is working on the same thing basically. Here's the Zest protocol in the background, and this will be even more important when SBTC comes out and Bitcoin is very crucial part, I guess, from in wallets, if that makes sense. So I've also linked some prior work here in the wallet API space. Just if anyone wants to look at this, I can share these slides for afterwards and all these links as well. Because Wallet Connect already gives us a lot of things for free, and that's why Xverse is experimenting with it. For example, the sessions over QR code initiated relay sessions. So you could, for example, look at a Stacks enabled website on your desktop browser, but then connect to it with your mobile phone wallet, right? Even though the website isn't on the phone and the wallet isn't on your desktop, you can have these talk to each other encrypted through relays that are initiated by QR codes. And in other ecosystems like Ethereum, many of you have maybe experienced a sort of solution like that. So that is awesome for Wallet Connect. And there's some other APIs that are very similar to Wallet Connect, be it with or without these QR code sessions that essentially you even could call it air gap if you want to, sort of your connection between wallet and application, making things a lot safer. So yeah, I wanted to bring this up for discussion or just pull this into the broader ecosystem community eyes, just so we can share our thoughts on the different functionalities, on the different proposed APIs. I prefer it if it's not one company or two companies designing this. That makes it harder for the next wallet to open up their doors and for developers to start. But I also want to avoid one or two players clashing with each other and maybe turning the ecosystem into something that only works with certain wallets. I think that would be very destructive for Stacks. So I want to propose working on these parameters that have been brought up in the SIPs issues and in work from the wallets already. How do we target, for example, multiple recipients? Do we use public keys over addresses if possible? How do we decode things like big integers that can be serialized in multiple ways as strings, for example? And I want to have a SIP, a proposal, a standard that encompasses all these important things first, because once we have these, that will make adding new functionality really easy, right? The options APIs we have right now, there's nothing really special about them. There's nothing proprietary that's really secret or good or bad in a sense. You could just add Stacks transfer and replace Stacks with Bitcoin, and technically your wallet could allow that as a feature, but the wallet will have to do that if the website expects a certain format. So I would love it if there's one standard, and this standard can be used via Wallet Connect, for example, but also via other APIs, and the standard could be the same even if different web apps use different implementations. So this is sort of what I want to bring onto the table, and I'm happy to discuss now here if anybody already has thoughts on this. I know there's Mark from the Hero wallet. I don't know if anybody from the Xverse team is on this call, but yeah, this is something that's important to me because I think it's going to be a big impact on web app developers, and the websites, the Stacks enabled websites or Bitcoin enabled websites are, for most people, the first thing that they see when they want to join an ecosystem, right? There's some new cool thing they want to try out. they need a wallet for that, they need something for that. And if the developer's making these, then it's gonna, if it's hard for them, it's gonna be a pain for all the new folks coming in. What are the file types supported for inscriptions? I think they are pretty arbitrary, although the current ordinals.com explorers, they only support a few picture type, GIF and images, sort of file types. Sorry, I was just reading the chat there. I'm happy to pause here if anybody has any thoughts. And there's one other thing I'd like to also bring up in the next slide, but that's just an afterthought that I wanna bring up for wallet teams to maybe consider.
Yeah, I'll just echo from the Hero Wallet point of view that what you say as far as this being an important moment to make sure that we're standardizing is correct, because both on the Hero Wallet and X1st sides, we're ramping up to support app-based authentication against Bitcoin and also Bitcoin transactions. And of course, with SBTC, the whole process of going from Bitcoin and wrapping into SBTC and then wrapping back out. So I think it's sort of an opportunity for us to embrace this sort of sea change, if you will, as we really establish ourselves as a Bitcoin layer through integrating more deeply with apps to do sort of a better job standardizing and also documenting just how the APIs work. And so I'm looking forward to these conversations that we're going to have as far as just how to put the pieces together.
Yeah, sounds good. As for a question by Brad Baker, so just images then for inscribing on ordinals. No, technically you can post any data type. You could even post JavaScript code or a PDF if you wanted to, but it will depend largely on the Explorer you're using to view that inscription. So if your wallet or your Explorer doesn't support random data types, then it's probably not going to work for showing them, but the data is there and you can get it. For now, I'd stick to images though.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think from the wall point of view, we'll probably start with images, but I mean, there's Doom already inscribed, so the possibilities are quite endless.
Yes, and I've even seen an Explorer that did try to allow more data types, but that it actually became vulnerable to cross-site scripting. So it was actually executing code that somebody inscribed. So that can be dangerous as well.
And if I can just try and summarize what you just said, like a thing. So this is something that will help to help different wallet providers to send the same type of transaction and calling the API rather than everybody doing their own type of thing. We have a global consensus on how to call the transaction, or could you correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah, that tracks. So if we look at this draft, for example, it's a very simple API that's being proposed where a wallet, I mean, as in the client side of a web app, sorry. So the client, if you want to call it Stacks Connect, for example, then these would be methods that client could call for web app developers to more easily talk to a wallet browser extension, for example. And each browser extension would expose this, you can call it API, an interface that can be very simple, right? So right here, there's a request accounts as an example. This could be how you get accounts from a wallet. So a web app could call this code, which would pop up a dialog as it's being done today, where you select the account you want to log in with. And once your wallet you have selected that account in the wallet, the web app can use the accounts you've provided. And with sort of this approach where the method is an arbitrary string, that the wallet needs to support. It's very easy to add new features because right now every wallet would have to change their API that they're exposing if they want to allow for a new feature. But if we try to go in this direction, it would be very easy to prefix, for example, by chain and do different request accounts. The standard for Bitcoin could look very similar as to the standard for STX. The wallet could even expose sort of beta types. So you could prefix it with xverse underscore, for example, kind of showing that, oh, this is an xverse feature for now. It might become a standard later, similar to the prefixed x in HTTP headers, which you might know. And this would just be very simple for the developers, I guess. And the other part of that API is listen. So you can also listen to changes that would be triggered in the app. So these are two parts of a similar coin, I guess. And an event could be something like changing network in your wallet. If you want a web app to use a certain network, mainnet or testnet, for example, right now, if you change that in your wallet, nothing really will happen on the web app side. They don't know what you want by doing that as a user in your wallet. So this could be an additional API that makes these things a lot easier. And similar, we can look at to the example from Wallet Connect, which also has their documentation online, and they already have proposed sort of parameters for a call, which we can look into this example code. So it's a very simple design, basically a request similar to the one being proposed here, and a method which accepts parameters, and anything that you pop in here would be sent to the wallet, and after that it's up to the wallet what to do with that, if that makes sense. And I think it's important at this stage that we sort of standardize what these parameters could look like, right? Is pub key, should that actually be a public key? Should it be an address? The function arguments, how are those encoded? Right now, there's no real standard for that. It's based on stacks.js in this case. Post condition mode, the same thing. And
may I ask, like, just as a sort of out of curiosity, and maybe maybe for the folks who doesn't know, like, how come there wasn't this standard before? Because it sounds like a very fundamental thing to have.
I guess the best standard is code, some people might say, and that's how it sort of evolved. So as people were figuring out what's important, right? For example, message signing as arbitrary message signing has just come out sort of in the stack space last year, even though that's a thing in other ecosystems. But as these protocols evolved, they were just added as a best practice, I guess. A lot of this has been sort of in Blockstack or stacks for a long time. So the implementation was the standard at that point, right there, especially when it comes to hosted Blockstack instances from way back. And while that transitioned over to the more blockchainy stacks ecosystems, it just was the same implementation, if that makes sense. And there was efforts to standardize this even after the fact, right? That's a strategy a lot of the time. So for example, if you open a SIP or a BIP in other ecosystems, most of the time you want to have an implementation ready. You want to maybe have a testnet version of this to prove that it works, or in the activation details, there might be some sort of rule for a certain amount of wallets that need to implement this to consider a standard active. And it just never got to that point, right? So it just kept evolving. There just kept on being more changes, so the standard couldn't keep up with the real world implementation, if that makes sense. And I'm sorry if this is too technical for these SIP calls. This is my first SIP call, so I'm
No,
not
it's
sure what
okay.
I'm
It's
doing
okay.
right or wrong.
I think it can vary really. Like I do think generally people can get into some technical. Although I do think like analogies could help because I think you guys all know what you're talking about on GitHub, and I think the SIP call I try to tailor a little bit towards the community who don't have GitHub, they don't read any of this stuff, to sort of help them understand what goes on behind the curtain. Like all the code devs and all the developers are sort of working hard in the background, but like the normal NFT, typical average stacks NFT guys, they have no idea. Like people are building these important key fundamental blocks behind the background in order to facilitate what people see at the end of the day. Oh, sending a BTC transaction. I think that visibility is not enough there. Therefore, I try to utilize some of these sessions to bring these sort of development into the light. Trying to get community, average community people on it, educate and inform them about all this development, and also give them a chance to have their say. So from a decision perspective, it also helps decentralization of the governance or having your say. Therefore, I do think maybe would be nice if sometimes developer can offer some analogies that will help the audience.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's all great. We are learning all this codes as we go, really. May I just ask a very quick question? So who do you need support for this API? Presumably just wallet providers, or do you need like Zest or Alex to chime in on this? Who do you need support from?
At some point, definitely, right? So all these web apps that do want to include support for Bitcoin transactions at some point will have to update their dependencies, right? And at that point, I ideally want to have a standardized implementation in any client that they might be already using. So right now, in most cases, that's MicroStacks or Stacks Connect. And that's sort of a compatible client implementation for how a button or a function call on the web app would trigger a wallet, a desktop extension in this case. So really there's no real change in how the wallet would communicate from a options perspective, right? To trigger this dialogue, the wallet just has to know from where to where it's sending how much BTC, if that makes sense. And that's a fairly simple API, right? And the current Stacks API could just be translated to Bitcoin. There's not a lot of changes that are necessary, but there's a few that are enough to, in my opinion, warrant a discussion on how these parameters are changed. For example, in Bitcoin, you might want to have multiple recipients, which we didn't really have a use case for in Stacks for now. So it's just a matter of standardizing these parameters, and then we could technically keep the current API that's happening already in all the Stacks enabled background websites, in all the Stacks enabled websites in the background. And that's a very terse way right now because it has to be added manually. And if a wallet team wants to experiment with a new feature, they'll have to open up a request to Connect or MicroStacks and say, hey, do you want to sort of implement this feature? And if they do, they'll add maybe a beta or an alpha version, or might even add an experimental feature to their main latest release. But at that point, it might not be final yet. So it would be great to have something a lot more flexible for all these new protocols and web apps that want to experiment with things that aren't really ready yet, right? In the process of making a SIP and standardizing a SIP, there's a lot of things that you need to experiment with and change. And sometimes you realize, oh, a public key doesn't work or an address doesn't work because you might need something else later. A lot of things in crypto only work in one direction and not the other. So you need to figure out all these requirements. And during that process, you might want to still allow early access to users or have beta features, if that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. Do you want to talk about the other SIP?
Yeah, so the other SIP, before we talk about that one, I mean, there is not really a SIP more than sort of what Wallet Connect would have as parameters here. Sorry, where's the transfer? So if we look at a token transfer, and Xverse is going to announce, I think, what they've been working on Bitcoin soon, but it's basically just this. So all the SIP really is specifying a chain that would say Bitcoin and have Bitcoin here rather than stacks. And that's sort of the same thing. And I'm not even sure if we need a SIP for Bitcoin transfers if we manage to get the wallet API SIP done right and this sort of take the step back and focus on the abstraction layer that we can look at. So if we get this right, I think there might not need to be like a SIP for every tiny feature that we want a wallet to do. We could keep it very small. I like the feature that the nips that Nostr has, right? They're very tiny sort of SIPs, sometimes just like 2 paragraphs and 1 line of code. And if we get some base assumptions right and sort of agree upon how things are serialized or how things are read and what parameters look like and what parameters are accepted here, right? Is this always an object? Is this an array and assumes an order of parameters? Things like that. If we get that right, I think we might not need SIPs for future features, or the SIPs could be very tiny and just be like a set of, okay, recipients can be an array or can be 1 address. And then that's the whole SIP, more or less. Does that make sense? Yeah, I like small SIPs. Good.
Yeah.
Good meme, Mark.
Jesse, if you want to unmute, but he did
Yes.
ask in the. Cool.
Yes. So I joined a little late, so I don't know if this has been mentioned, but when I hear things like wallet API, as I put in the chat, the first thing I think about are the security and privacy implications. Has that been addressed on the call, or is that something that is going to be addressed in the SIP itself?
So the base SIP, so first of all, it hasn't been really addressed yet on this call. I know Kyron is thinking about that as well. And I like the concept of doing things like request accounts that have been proven in other ecosystems. But right now, it wouldn't really be a big shift in security or privacy to what's being done today. It would just be a different flavor that can be standardized for features going forward. So, but that's a good point. I
will admit that, since I joined a little late, I missed the beginning of this. So when I see wallet API, I may be thinking of something different than what you're proposing here.
Yeah, so right now it's basically the connect API. How does a web app communicate with a wallet?
Got it. Okay.
And that most of the time that's through these global JavaScript objects that are injected into a website.
Mm-hmm.
And from there on out, there's different ideas on how to do things. Right now, the Stacks Connect example implements just methods that are available to a web app, and that can be called or not. And whatever is returned by the wallet is then up to the wallet for security and privacy reasons. They can return whatever they want, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, looking forward to the proposal. I'm sure I'll have more questions once it's published.
Yeah, I'll try to maybe
looks good from what I see here. Looks really cool.
Maybe we can start like a Discord thread with some of the Xverse team. I'm trying to chat with them a lot more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in that Discord server, so yeah, just ping me there as well.
Sounds good. And a good thing you bring up security and privacy, because I also wanted to give an afterthought to wallet developers, if there are any in the crowd, because right now most of the parameters passed when requesting, just requesting things from wallet, most of these options are just everything you need to make a transaction, more or less, right? There's some exceptions, for example, fee, you can change in your wallet, right? You can say this transaction should have a high fee, a low fee, or a custom fee, but most other things are either passed by, yeah, sorry, I'm looking into the chat here. Yeah, definitely, that's a good approach there, Mark. But I think we can go even further to limit malicious transaction requests, right? In my head, it's something like a suggest API, and this is something a few folks I've been working with have thought about as well. Is, for example, saying this transaction should have this post condition, or it should have this post condition mode, and that being very clear that it's suggested, because technically your wallet could change the post condition mode, right? If you see there's an unsafe post condition mode in a transaction, your wallet could say, hey, I want to change that to the safe version. And then that might break the transaction, right? But you get the safety of knowing that it's a safer post condition mode. And this goes for a lot of different types of fields. And it would be nice to maybe split this out into sort of the payload part, which is very specific to the transaction type, right? For example, a contract deploy payload needs the name and the code, but a transfer payload type needs a recipient and an amount and that kind of stuff. But then there's this other stuff that's outside of this payload envelope: fee, nonce, post condition mode. And this is the same for any transaction. And in that sense, it could be treated as something that a web app can only suggest, and you in your wallet could accept whatever the web app suggested, sort of how it's been doing today, right? You can only cancel or accept the transaction, apart from being able to change the fee. But in the future, it could be cool to also have post conditions or post condition mode be able to be changed from the wallet itself. Just an afterthought for security.
Is that the end of the slide?
That's the end of my thoughts for today. I'm happy to answer any more questions if there's thoughts, questions, confusions.
I have a thought. I love dongers. I love this. More dongers.
Okay, sounds good.
Dongers rise up.
So I got two questions. First is like, so because it's between improving the web app and how that communicates with the wallet, right? So do you need like builders, developers such as Zest or other protocols, like, because I can imagine like NFT lending could be using this. So do you need them to sort of give it a quick look as well? Or do you just need the wallet providers to take a look at this?
I think right now the most important perspective is probably from the wallet providers, the wallet implementers, because how we expose this to a web app can still be changed, right? So Stacks Connect, even if they use this to communicate to the wallet, it could expose a different API similar to the one being exposed today to the developers in a web app. but I'm definitely happy to get all the input from them as well, right? Maybe there's some protocol or some use case that requires a certain data type or a serialization that only works one way, and those types of inputs might be very important as well. So I'm happy to talk to those as well. But
is it the
yeah,
right time to jump in, or maybe you need to work with the wallet provider first before they jump in? The builders.
Right now, my thought is get Hero Wallet and
Okay.
Xverse talking
Okay.
and do that publicly. That's why I wanted to talk about this as well, just to get the talk out there and make this a bit more visible in the community. So we can start a Discord thread, for example, get the wallet teams talking, maybe get them on the same page, rather than sort of splitting the community into 2 camps of wallets or 3 camps of wallets, stuff like that.
I wonder whether we would start a thread on the governance under like a web API thread, or is it better in the developers channels?
Yeah, maybe start with the developers channel for now. And
Okay.
the UI the wallets exposed can still be however they want it, and they can have opinionated differences there. But the serialization and the communicating with web apps, that should be standard in my opinion. But feel free to chime in with any other opinions as well.
Yeah, so this SIP editor committee, I'm sort of helping to shape up, and I'm hoping to also utilize sort of these SIP editors troops to help you guys sort of reach out to the builders. Do you think that something will be useful for you? Because I can imagine you might be aware of all the builders, but somebody else who are new or the SIP author might not know all the builders that might want to use this, and they could be missing out on something like this. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely sounds good. I think if there's some sort of index or list of suitable builders that might be working on similar problems or new features, that might be great to add to the conversation. Definitely.
And just trying to understand sort of the impact of this and the urgency of this. Like what sort of if you can develop it sort of fairly quickly or maybe at normal speed, what sort of timeline are we looking at? Like is it like a month we need, or when do you think it can be put through the decision-making process for the SIP?
Yeah, I think the development effort is not really the limiting factor here. I think it's more sort of the human consensus side. And I just want to avoid ending up in an ecosystem where every web app sort of needs to tell you can only use this wallet and all other wallets won't work, because that just doesn't work for our tooling. In my opinion, that would suck. So I think it's more the human standard sort of side of things. It's not really the implementation details
I see.
that are hard.
I see. So we actually just need to get whoever builders or wallet provider affected or interested or might be utilizing these into the same sort of thread or room and reach a fairly like fair consensus for now, and that sort of thing can be moved on.
Definitely. Yeah, and
Okay.
and for the question, like how critical or like important is this?
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
that anything is going to like break or stop if this isn't added, or if consensus is not found for this. But especially now where there's a lot of hype and traction with Bitcoin and stacks coming closer to Bitcoin, I think it's better to do this earlier than later.
And earlier by sort of what sort of timeline are you thinking of?
I mean, if if we find consensus like broadly in the community, this could be done in a week or two, but that really depends on humans and meetings.
Okay. Okay.
So I
Understand.
can't promise anything.
Oh, no, I understand. Then maybe, yeah, maybe if you want to reach out to people, or if we as a sort of SIP community, especially the SIP editors, can help you reach out, we'll do that.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I'll talk to you about setting up a good Discord thread, and we'll ping the important folks there. And I can also share these slides if anybody is interested.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much for your slides.
Thank you for
yeah.
hosting.
Maybe if you stop sharing, I'll just finish off, close out.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so thank you, Janek, for the what sounds going to be quite an impactful work, and maybe it's a good one to catch the momentum now that we have a lot of eyes on stacks. To be honest, over the past week, I've been hearing lots of people mentioning stacks or curious about stacks from the Bitcoin world and from the Ethereum world. So maybe this is a great chance to sort of to demonstrate that our narrative is about Bitcoin through something like this as well. So yeah, so here on this call, we talk about all sorts of stuff, any Bitcoin improvement stuff, Taproot, ecosystem DAO, voting. The next vote might be coming up, you know, in the next few quarters. We'll talk about voting criteria, mining decentralization, and we'll use this chance to improve people's education on SBTC in the greater Stacks community as well. But yeah, so just a last quick call. If you want to contribute towards the SIP editors committee, here's a call for you, and we'll be it will involve responsibilities such as reviewing the SIP, welcoming people to the community who might be new, maybe education, technical mentor. So if you are interested, please let me know, and it will be one of the 3 critical committees in the whole governance and SIP process: the SIP editor, the CAP, and the steering committee. And you can find all the governance talk in Discord channel under the community category. So yeah, thank you everybody for your time, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.